And there we go. If I play now, and I click on any of them, they will always stay on top. Isn't that amazing? You just made your very own phone so quickly. In the past, you've probably played a Roblox game where you go into the game and it's likely a roleplay one where in the bottom right of the screen, you're actually going to have a phone. And you have the option to open that phone and actually use apps inside it. And this is really cool because it actually looks something like you would do in real life, right? You would have a phone open and it actually gives a player a lot of features. And you probably thought to yourself, well, I want to make one too because this is really cool. And it's because of this that you probably clicked on this video, because you want to learn how to make it for yourself. Because let's be honest, being able to make a phone like this, but actually in your screen that you can interact with, is really cool. But before we start, you're probably wondering, why does the screen look so squished, right? Why does everything look so close together? Why is the text so long? And it's because I'm using an ultra-wide monitor, and when it shrinks down to actually fit the recording of your screen, the normal screen, then it becomes squished. So before we actually begin, we need to have a basic phone. Just a basic setup that we can use to make it interactive, to make it animated, and to add some flair to it. So in the description, I'm going to put a file or a link that's going to be the basic bare bones version of the phone that you can use to follow along with this tutorial. Alright, so I got my phone model in here. I got it loaded. Of course, it's going to actually show the proper time once you load in the game. And then you have some other apps here as well. And so it's great. It's a great place to go. It scales on all devices. And now we can get started. And inside, if you'll notice, I have all of these folders and frames labeled so you can tell what each does. And these apps are all of these little squares over here. What if you actually want to animate the app? What happens when you click on them, right? Because right now, if I go into the game and test it out, let's see. See, nothing happens. But we can fix that by making a script which plays an animation for us. So we're going to head into our apps folder and we're going to create a new script. And make sure that it's a local script and not a normal script, because local scripts are what actually work for the players to see. So over here, you're going to get some default text. Let's erase that. So let's think about this. What do we actually want it to do for us? We want it so that it detects when we click on it. And then once we click on it, it should be able to open smoothly and gradually to the size of the entire screen. And that's easy. We can change the size and we can use tween service, which is used for animations, to make it look smooth. So let's go back into the script. So now we have to define what the app actually is. What does it mean for it to be an app? Well, we can say the app is, well, first we have to go into the apps folder. Then we have to go into each of the frames. And remember, we can't just choose one of them. We have to do it for all of them. And this is really simple. Let's go and select the apps folder. So the apps folder is equal to script.parent. And now we want to go through each item in the apps folder that's a frame. Because remember, if you select this and you go to the properties, you'll see it's a frame. So you want to select all of the frames. You don't want to select a script, just a frame. First, we have to go through each item. So you want to start off by creating a for loop. You want to say for I, comma, item in apps folder get children do. Now, what does this do? Apps folder get children. All it does is it goes into the apps folder, which is this right here, and it will access every single child, which is every single thing that is right below it, and it will return that to us. And what is I? Well, I is actually an index, which is just a number that is assigned to each item. So this will be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. We don't actually care about that. What we care about is the actual item, what this actually is. So let's go and change this I and replace it with an underscore. Now we know that this is pointless and we don't care about it. So let's say if item, because remember, we're changing the size of the app and we don't want it to change the size of the script itself, because size is actually a property inside of the frame. So if I've selected app, you can see on the right here, size is a property over here. But if I go into the script, you'll see there's no size property. We have to specify that it's looking for specifically a frame. Let's say if item is a frame, then now let's see, well, what do we want to do if it's a frame? Well, first it needs to detect when we click, right? When we click on it. Now the way we detect if the item is actually clicked on is by saying item.input, and now you have 3 options here: input began, input ended, and input changed. Once you click on the app like this, that's input began. But what we really want is when we leave, when we're currently clicking, but we stop. That's what a click is, right? like that, and input ended, connect, and then you want to put function in here, and then click enter. And now what this does is every time an input ends, it's gonna run some code. But we didn't specify what type of input it is. It could be your mouse just enters, or maybe you right click. So we need to specify exactly what it is. And the way we can detect the input is by going into this function quotes here, and you can see there's an input object. And what this does is it'll allow us to specify what type of input we want. So first, let's just say inp, which just stands for input, and it's just any generic input that it finds. And now we can say if inp, which is the input, dot keycode equals enum dot keycode dot. So you may be confused, what does this mean? It's just saying if the type of input, the keycode, is equal to, and this is looking through all the possible types of inputs, and it'll find us all the ones that we can use. So if I put a dot here, you'll see it shows us all the possible inputs. So you could click a colon, a comma, the number 8, and then it will allow us to do something with that. So we want to say mouse left button, right? Because that's the one we use to click. So you want to say if it's equal to the mouse left button, then, and notice the double equals here. That's so that you're comparing it and not because you're setting a value. But now some of you may notice a problem with this. What if you're using a phone? Or what if you're using a controller? How would you detect when the user clicks? Because not all Roblox players play on their laptop. Some of them play on phones, a lot of them actually. So you're gonna lose out on a lot of players if you don't make it accessible for everyone. So then we could say, well, okay, if it's equal to that, or if the input.keycode is equal to enum.key, and that's just so boring. There's a quicker way that I'll show you just now. So insert an image button under here, inside the local script. And now we want to change some settings for this. And trust me, it'll make sense later on, just do it now. You want to make the size of this 1. You want to make the background transparency 1. You want to make the image disappear, and that's it. Now you want to go back here, and you want to access that button. You say local button is equal to script dot, because notice, the script is actually the current script. We don't have to go back to the apps folder, we can just go directly from the script and say script.image button. And the cool thing about this button here is that it can detect any type of input with one single event. So instead of checking for each type of inputs, all we have to do with the button is say colon clone. This will make a copy of it. And what are we trying to do exactly? Well, we're taking this button and we're going to be putting it inside each of these apps. And you might be saying, well, why don't you just do that now? It's going to be so much easier. But the problem is, you shouldn't repeat yourself. That's so tedious. You have to go here. You have to say, okay, Control C, Control V, and then it goes up here, and then let me drag it down here again. And let me repeat that 5 more times. No, that's a waste of time. Save your time by going back in here, and you want to say, if the item is a frame, then we want to put a button inside it. So let's copy this code, put it inside here. And now we'll say, okay, we made the clone, but we need to specify where it goes. So we'll say button.parent is equal to item, because it's going to be inside the frame. And the frame is going to be item. But now what do we want to do? Remember our problem that we couldn't detect all types of input? Well, this button is actually going to fix that. So we'll say button dot, and now you can see there's mouse button 1 click. But what we want is activated. And look at this. Fires when the button is activated. Anytime any sort of input clicks on the button, it'll activate, whether you're on a phone or a console or a PC. You want to say activated, and this is a function, so you'll say connect function, and you can take the input object and the click count, but we don't really care because we just want it to work when they click. Boom. Now we can change the size. Now we can say, okay, you clicked. Now I'm going to change the size of the window. First, we need to select the frame that we're currently going to change the size of. And that frame is obviously item. It's the current item. We're going to say item, tween, size, and position. And this will allow us, like I mentioned before, tween service is used to smoothly change size and position. And in this case, that's exactly what we want. And if you go inside of these parameters here, you're going to see a bunch of options. So we have end size, we have end position, easing direction, easing style, time, override, callback. There's so many things that you have to worry about. But don't worry, even if it sounds intimidating, I'll explain what each one means. And the best part is, we don't even have to worry about all of them. What we really need is just the end size, which is obviously the size that fits the entire screen, and the end position, which obviously once we change the size, you can notice it's not going to be able to fit the entire screen just like that. Because if we move the frame like this and we go to the position, then you'll see it's 0, 0. But if I press Ctrl Z and go back to the normal size, you'll see that the position is actually different than 0, because whenever we change the size like this, the position changes with it too. And so for each app, we know that obviously the size is going to be, if we change the size here, it's 1, 1, because it's fitting inside of the screen. And the position is also changing the same amount each time. It's always going to 0, 0. And we can use that to our advantage. We can open this up here, and end size is, you can notice it's a udim2 value, which is just for UI elements. So go to udim2.new, and this is actually very similar to vector3 values, which are used for part sizes. So vector3.new, you can notice it's the same thing. So don't be intimidated by it. So udim2.new, but instead of doing from new, we're going to do from scale, because notice our offset is actually 0 each time. No matter if it's a size or position, we don't want an offset, because an offset makes it so that the size doesn't stay the same on all screens. Now you can notice we have no offset and the phone looks exactly the same on an iPhone 7. And that's exactly what we want. So we say udim2 from scale, and over here, the X scale. So what do we want it to be? Well, this is our end size. We want it to be 1, 1. Now we add a comma here, and we put the second parameter, and it's the end position. Now our end position, remember we said was 0, 0. So let's say udim2 from scale 0, 0. Now easing direction, what is that? Well, it just tells us if we have a style chosen. So if the style is fast and then slow, or slow and then fast for the animation, we can choose whether it happens in reverse order or not. So let's just choose a default one. Let's go with enum.easing direction, because notice that's what it says here. Let's just go with in. Then let's go to easing style, and this is how the actual animation plays. There's a lot of different ones out there. Some of them will actually overshoot, which means they'll go over the amount they're supposed to and then go back. That's something like bounce. But linear, on the other hand, will, as you guessed it, it would go in sort of a line pattern. It would go slowly and slowly, but it would stay the same pace each time. And linear, let's just go with it because it's the default option, and you can do whatever you like based on the options in enum.easing style. So if you scroll down here, you'll see all of them. If you want to see any specifics, you go to open documentation. You can see here what the graph looks like. So linear is constant, sine is slow and then fast, and there's some wonky ones too, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. I'm going to choose linear and then time. And this is obviously how long it takes. How long in seconds the tween should take to complete. Let's just go with 1 to experiment. And let's look at one more and override. This is very important. And to show you what that actually does, let's look at this image button we have in the top left here. Now, every time I hover my mouse over it, it's going to change size. And when I leave it, it's going to change size as well. But if I say override is false, it's actually going to be pretty inconsistent. So if I go really quick, and if I go over something else, you'll see it's not actually doing it each time. If I keep putting my mouse over it, it's not consistent at all. You see, I'm putting my mouse here, nothing's happening. And that's the problem with keeping override to false. It's not going to be consistent if you set it to false. So we obviously want to say true. And let's look at one more parameter, callback. This doesn't really matter for us, so let's just take it out. And now you can see we have a tween ready to go. And now let's reset the position back to normal. And now let's test it out. Let's go to play, and we can select any one of these buttons. I'll select this one, and look at that. it became the size of the entire screen. But there's no way to go out of this. So let's change that. Now there's multiple ways you can choose a home screen. Now the most recent iPhones have a swipe up feature, and older iPhones, as you can see in this phone model right here, they actually had buttons down here. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna add the buttons because they're more clear on what they do. So let's go ahead and add that. And I didn't keep it that way in the normal phone model because I know some of you would want the swipe up feature. So at the end of the day, it's up to you. Let's go here, let's change the size, and let's add a button down here. I'm gonna go to the holder. I'm gonna add a text button. I'm gonna rename it to home screen. Now you might be wondering, why did I choose a home screen? Why did I choose a text button? Well, it doesn't really matter because I'm just gonna take out the text, and now it's just gonna be a plain white button. And now I can just change the size. Well, first I need to remove the offset. Let's say 1,1. And now I need to make it a circle. I'm gonna make it a square first, and then I'm gonna add a UI corner to it. And with this UI corner, if I change the scale value and remove the offset, then I can make it a huge number like 2, and you can see it becomes a circle. And all I have to do is make it a little bit smaller and scale down the size, and we have a home screen button right there. Amazing. Now that I added a UI stroke, it looks much more like a home screen button. And now we can start making it actually work. Let's go into the home screen button and let's add a script here. First, let's declare what the home screen button actually is. And it's the parent of the script because it's right above it. Local button is equal to script.parent. And now we want to say button.activated every time it's activated, which means it's clicked by either a phone or a mouse button or anything else. We can detect when it happens. What do we want to say here? What do we want it to do? We're saying we want to make it so that the size of the screen goes back to normal. And the way we can do that, first we have to find which app is the size of the entire screen. So let's go through all the apps and let's say which of them has a size of 1,1. So let's first declare the apps folder here. Local apps is equal to button. First we go to button, then we want to go above the button to holder, the parent of it, then we want to go into screen and then apps. I know it sounds really inefficient, but that's just how the parent-child system works. So button.parent.screen.apps. We can add a comment over here with 2 dashes saying apps folder. And this is helpful for us to know what this actually means without actually changing our code. So now we want to say for, and remember in the old script, when we went through something and we didn't care about the index, which is basically the number assigned to it, like 1, 2, 3, 4, we just put an underscore there. And that's what we're going to do here as well, because we don't care about the number of the app. We just care about what the actual app is. For underscore comma v, and instead of v, which is just placeholder name for value, we'll say item in apps do. And same thing here. We want to first see if it's an actual frame and not a script. Let's copy this code because it's saying if item is a frame. So if item is a frame. And we also want to see if it's the size of the entire screen. So we want to say and item dot size equals udem2 dot from scale 1,1, which remember we said the size of the frame is equal to the entire screen, aka it's a full screen app. You want to say item dot size is equal to, now imagine this scenario. It's the size of the entire screen. I know this is not perfect, but just to give you an example. Now, we want to animate it and put it back to its original position. So how do we do that? Because remember, we don't know what the original position was. We know that the original size was, if I go here, you can see that the original size is always 0.269 and ignoring the offset, comma 0.172. But what about the position? Because the position, while the size is the same for all of them, the position is actually changing. Now there's a lot of ways you can go about doing this, of finding the right position, but the one I can think of off the top of my head right now is to go back into the script here and say, and copy this for loop, and I'll explain what I'm doing in a second, but you copy and paste this here, and for each one of these frames, you want to do something different. What I want to do is create a new value for each one of them. So if I search value here, you can see there's a bunch of values we can create. But what I want to create is a string value, because this will allow us to hold any type of data. So we go to string value, but over here, we can paste anything inside. And what we want to do is for each one of them, we want to create a new string value. So we want to say local position value is equal to instance.new, and instance.new is used to create any new object. And over here, we specify what exactly it is we want to create. So if you so here you can search for a string value, and you can see it's finishing it for you. And the second part, if you add a comma, is actually the optional object to parent the new instance to. And in simple terms, what this means is, where do you want to put this value? Because we created it, but we never said where we actually want it, because the game didn't know that we want it under the frame. So we'll just say item, because that's the current frame. And now we want to say position value dot value, which is the actual property which holds the information for us, is the item's position. And that's it. And now we can just add one more thing over here and say position value dot name. And yes, it's different from the type. And this might be confusing to you because you're saying, well, we specified, right? The name is a string value. Well, that's actually the type. That's the type of thing it is. The name, if you click on the value and go to the properties, is actually, we could choose any name, and you can see it updates here. That's what we use to select it. So we want to say the name is equal to, and let's change the name to small position. There we go. Now what this is doing is, for each one of the apps, it's creating a new value, and it's storing what its position is at the start. And as you remember, at the start, they're all small. So this works for us. Now all we have to do is go back into our other script and say item tween size and position. And remember, there were a bunch of values here. I'll just copy and paste them. And this is the end size, remember? This is the end size. And this is the end position. And the end position is what it should be like in the end. And remember, if it's currently big, we want it to become small. That's what the end size and position will be. The end size, let's just look at any of these apps and get the size, because remember, it's going to be the same for all of them. Let's copy and paste it here. But these are the offset values, and remember we're doing the scale. So let's remove this and any of these square brackets, because that's not what it's looking for. There we go. And the position, instead of saying udim2.from scale, we're going to say the position is item dot, remember the value we created? Its name was small position. We're going to go to item dot small position. Just to visualize, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to go into the app, then the small position, and then we want the value. So small position dot value. And there we go. Let's test it out and make sure it works. We're getting an error here. It's saying unable to assign property value, and I just figured out what it is. So it's trying to store the position. But the problem is, if I choose position over here, you'll see that it's a udim2 value. It's not a string value, and a string is basically just a bunch of text. When you put text in quotation marks, like this. This is string value. But what we have is a udim2.from scale value, which is completely different. But not to worry, it's a really easy fix. All you have to do is say toString, which makes sense. It returns the provided value converted to a string. And item.position. Position. And let's remove this extra bit at the end here. There we go. Let's try it. Let's click on this app. It becomes big. Click on the home screen. And we get another error. Attempt to iterate over an instance value. Wait, what? Okay, so after Googling a bit, I found out the issue. First, you need to go through each of the children instead of just the apps folder. Because remember, that's exactly what we did here. We went through each item inside of the apps folder. So remember to add that. And we need to put the position value actually where the position is. And we need to put the size value up here. I had originally switched both of them, so please make sure to fix that. And now if you go to play, you'll see we have a bunch of app icons, and I was just testing this out. Click on one of them, we click the home button, it works out perfectly. But there is still one more error. If you click, and not a literal error, but this is a problem that you might want to fix. If you click on the green button, you can see these other apps are overlapping it. And how do we fix that? Because we don't want that, do we? Because we don't want these apps interfering with us. Look, we can click on other ones with them, and it's completely weird. But there's a really easy fix, thankfully. So what we want to do is first look at the z-index of each app. And the z-index is just how forward each one is. So you can remember the z-index, this one, since it's higher than the green one, is overlapping it. And the green one, if I put it over here, it goes behind it. But if I change the z-index of the green app to something like 100, it doesn't need to be that big, it could be just 2 or 3. But if I change it to something like that, and now I try changing the size, it'll actually go over it. That's what z-index is, it's just layering them on top. So we need to change the z-index every time we click to make sure it goes on top of everything, and then we need to actually change it back once we close it, once we close the app. And the default value for the z-index is 1, so that's what we'll use. First, when we're clicking on the app, remember here, this is where we're making it the size of the entire screen. We want to say item.z-index equals, and let's choose just a really large number to make sure it always stays on top, 1000, because maybe you're adding some changes in the future and you add some UI elements that go on top. 1000 will always work out. And over here, when we're changing the size of the screen back to normal, we want to say task.wait, because we want to wait until it first shrinks back, and then we want to change the z-index, because we don't want it to currently be changing sizes and be below everything else. We want it to first go back and then make sure it's at the normal level as everything else. We want to wait the animation length, which is 1, and then we want to say item.z-index equals 1, which is the default value. And there we go. If I play now and I click on any of them, they will always stay on top. Isn't that amazing? You just made your very own phone so quickly, and you can always change any of these values later on. You can open multiple apps. That's funny. And there you have it, a perfectly working phone that's interactive for you. And obviously, you can customize this to your own liking. Once you click on one of these apps, you can actually make the background and any stuff inside it appear by just going into the apps folder and adding some stuff here. So what I would do, once I make it the size of the entire screen, I'm going to put the z-index on top, 5, and then I'm going to start adding stuff inside. So maybe I want the text label, maybe I want a text label here, and maybe I want the text to say something like, hello. And maybe this is what the app looks like. Now obviously this is horrid, I wouldn't recommend you do it, but it's just to give you an idea. And the way I would make it work is by going into the script, which changes the size of this app to make it entirely big. And say over here, for, this is another for loop, you don't care about the index, you just care about the item, but we already declared item here, so we have to say item2 in item. We're going through each thing inside of the app, and we're gonna call it item2, and the main item is the app. So we're saying item.get descendants, because get children only gets each of these things. But what if you have maybe a UI corner inside of this text label, well, then you would want to access that too, wouldn't you? So you're going to say get descendants, which lets you do that. Get children would only get these two. Get descendants would get all three of these. Do, and you would just say item 2. And now, this is the tricky part. You would have to first see if each of these can be enabled. So over here, it's actually called visible for the text label. But as you can see with the UI corner, it's actually not there. And with other things as well, like image buttons, they also have the property called visible. So you can use this to your advantage by saying item2.visible equals true. And now if you get an error, because UI corner does not have a property like this, you can just say if item2 is a, and this makes sense logically. If you're saying is this a, and you want to say if it's a UI corner, then continue end. All the statement does is say if the thing is a UI corner, then obviously we can't change its visible property. So instead, we're just going to ignore that, and we're just going to change the property of items that actually have the property visible. And you can add this for each one. So you could create a new statement, or you could just say, or item 2 is a, and you can just keep adding stuff here. And that's how you would go about making these apps. Now obviously, you would do the opposite thing in the end. In the other script, we just copy this, go here, and you would say, first, before you even tween it, you just want to make this stuff invisible. You're going to go inside of it for item 2 in item get descendants. And same thing here. You're just going to say item2.visible equals false. That's how you're going to make it work. So I hope you got something out of this. Please share any projects you make with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.